They say the night before a wedding is a dream, the kind of night where love feels invincible, where your heart beats faster just at the thought of forever. But for me, that night wasn't a dream. It was the moment I woke up to a truth I never wanted to see. Because just hours before I was supposed to say, I do, I caught the man I loved rehearsing his vows, not alone, not with a friend, but with his ex. And when I heard the way he said her name, the way his voice trembled when he whispered, "I'll always choose you," I knew my wedding wasn't about to begin. It was about to end. That evening, everything around me was glowing. The garden behind the resort shimmered under golden lights, the tables were set with fresh roses, and soft jazz floated through the air. Everyone was laughing, clinking glasses, talking about how perfect we were together. I smiled, nodded, played my part, the happy bride-to-be. But inside, I felt a strange unease. The kind that you can't explain, only feel in your bones. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it was instinct. I tried to shake it off. Ethan had been running around all day, making sure every detail was flawless. That's who he was, thoughtful, meticulous, the kind of man who wanted everything to be just right. He'd told me he wanted to practice his vows one last time that night, to make sure the words felt true. I laughed when he said that, teasing him that he didn't need to rehearse love. He'd smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "I just want them to be perfect for you." At that moment, I believed him. I wanted to. After he left, I sat by the window of my suite, looking at the reflection of the city lights dancing on my wedding dress. It was hanging by the mirror, pure white, soft lace at the sleeves, and a gentle shimmer that caught the light just right. I imagined walking down the aisle, Ethan's eyes lighting up when he saw me. I imagined our future, the house, the family, the endless laughter. For a moment, I let myself feel safe in that dream. But as the hours passed and Ethan didn't return, something inside me began to ache. He wasn't answering his phone. His best man said he'd gone to the rehearsal room to practice privately. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Yet, a small voice kept whispering, "Go see." I wish I hadn't. The hallway was quiet as I made my way downstairs. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor, echoing in the empty corridor. I could hear faint voices coming from the rehearsal room, low, intimate. I paused at the door, hesitating, my hand trembling on the handle. I shouldn't have listened. I should have walked away right then. But I didn't. I pushed the door open just enough to see inside. And that's when my world stopped. Ethan was standing in the middle of the room, wearing his suit jacket, his hair slightly messy from running his hands through it, the way he always did when he was nervous. But he wasn't alone. Sitting across from him, in the same red dress she had worn to our engagement party months ago, was Clara. His ex. The same Clara he swore he hadn't spoken to in over a year. The woman who had broken his heart, who left him for a career overseas, who, according to him, was nothing more than a chapter closed. I wanted to believe I was misinterpreting the scene. Maybe she had just come to wish him well. Maybe they were saying goodbye as friends. But then Ethan spoke. His voice was soft, shaky, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. "When I think about love," he said, "I think about you, Clara. You taught me what it means to feel everything at once, the joy, the pain, the chaos. You were my first real love. And no matter what happens tomorrow, I'll always carry that." Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. She reached for his hand, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't say that, Ethan. You're marrying someone else. She deserves all of you." He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "I know, and I want to give her that. But I can't pretend that a part of me doesn't still," his voice broke. "Doesn't still love you." The air left my lungs. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out, piece by piece. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I wanted to storm in, scream, ask him why. But my body wouldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, watching the man I loved confess that his heart wasn't mine. Clara shook her head, whispering, "You need to let me go, Ethan." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. I wanted to stop listening, but his next words cut through the silence like a knife. "I'll never stop choosing you, Clara. Even if it's only in memory." That was it. The moment everything inside me shattered. I didn't wait to hear anything else. I turned, my heels clicking against the floor, louder now, echoing through the empty hallway. I walked faster, my chest heaving, my heart breaking with every step. When I reached my room, I slammed the door shut, locked it, and finally let the tears fall. I fell to the floor, my body shaking with silent sobs. The dress was still hanging by the window, glowing softly in the moonlight, the dress that was supposed to be the beginning of my forever. Now it looked like a cruel joke. I walked over to it, touched the delicate fabric, and whispered, "You were supposed to be mine, Ethan. All of you." I sat by the window for hours, staring at the empty streets below. My phone buzzed repeatedly, messages from friends, family, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Around midnight, I stood up, opened my suitcase, and began to pack. My movements were calm, steady, deliberate, the kind of calm that comes after the deepest pain. I folded the few clothes I'd brought, tucked away my journal, and took off the engagement ring. It slipped from my finger so easily, like it had been waiting to leave. Before I left, I grabbed a piece of hotel stationery and wrote one single line. If you had to rehearse your vows with someone else, they were never written for me. I placed the note on the vanity beside my dress. Then I picked up my bag, took one last look at the room filled with dreams that would never come true, and walked out quietly. No tears, no drama, no goodbye, just silence. The night air was cool as I stepped outside. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's fiancé. I felt like myself, lost, but free. As I walked away from the hotel, a single thought echoed in my mind, a truth that would stay with me forever. Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to walk away. They say silence after heartbreak is the loudest sound in the world, and they're right. The morning after I left my wedding behind, the world seemed quieter than ever. The birds still sang, the sun still rose, but everything inside me felt hollow, like life was moving on without me. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My mother, my maid of honor, Ethan, all asking where I was, what had happened. But how could I explain that I'd discovered the truth in the most painful way possible? That the man I loved had already promised his heart to someone else, even before our vows began. I turned my phone off and stared out of the train window as the city disappeared behind me. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay. Every street corner, every whisper of his name, every reminder of the wedding would crush me again. So I ran from it, from the memories, from the noise, from him. After hours of traveling, I arrived at a small countryside town where my late aunt had left behind a wooden cabin by the lake. It was old, simple, and quiet, exactly what I needed. The air smelled like pine and rain. The silence was healing. There were no cameras, no questions, no pitying looks, just the soft rustle of leaves and the sound of water brushing against the shore. That first night, I barely slept. I replayed every moment in my head, his voice, her smile, my own disbelief. I kept asking myself what I had missed. Had the signs been there all along? The sudden silences when her name came up, the distant look in his eyes sometimes when I talked about the future. Maybe love had made me blind. I cried until there were no tears left. Then I sat down by the wooden table and opened a blank notebook. I didn't know why, maybe because I needed to get the pain out of me. So I began to write. Not about Ethan, not about Clara, but about me. The girl who had believed in forever, who had trusted too easily, who had walked away not because she stopped loving, but because she finally started respecting herself. The words poured out like a flood. Each line was a release. Each tear that fell onto the page felt like a piece of my soul cleansing itself. Days passed. Slowly, my heart began to breathe again. I cooked small meals, took walks by the lake, sat under the old oak tree where my aunt used to read to me as a child. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Not happiness yet, but peace, the kind that comes after you've survived something that should have broken you. Meanwhile, the world outside didn't stay silent. I didn't know it at first, but someone had overheard the conversation between Ethan and Clara that night. A hotel staff member, maybe, who then told someone else. Within days, the story spread. Runaway bride catches fiancé with ex on wedding eve. It hit social media like wildfire. By the time I turned my phone back on, there were thousands of messages waiting. Some were from strangers, Women who said my story gave them courage to leave toxic relationships, others who confessed they'd stayed when they should have walked away. It was overwhelming, but in a strange way, healing. I wasn't alone. My pain had a voice now, and it was echoing in the hearts of people who understood. A few weeks later, one evening as I was making tea, I heard the sound of a car approaching. The tires crunched against the gravel path, and my heart knew even before my eyes did. Ethan. I froze. Part of me wanted to hide, another part wanted to scream. But I stayed still, holding my mug tightly as he stepped out of the car. He looked different, tired, and shaven, his usual confidence replaced by guilt. He approached slowly, like someone afraid of breaking something fragile. "Lena," he said softly, "please, just listen." I didn't respond. I simply gestured for him to sit. He didn't. He just stood there, hands trembling slightly. "I messed up," he said finally. "I didn't mean for you to see that. It wasn't what it looked like." I gave him a hollow laugh. "You were rehearsing your vows with your ex, Ethan. Tell me, what exactly wasn't it supposed to look like?" He flinched, his voice cracking. "I wasn't choosing her over you. I just needed closure. I needed to end that chapter properly before starting a new one with you." I looked at him, my chest heavy with disbelief. "You needed closure the night before our wedding. The night you were supposed to promise me forever." He ran a hand through his hair. "I know it sounds wrong. But when she showed up unexpectedly, I didn't know how to react. I thought if I said what I felt one last time, I could finally move on." I shook my head slowly. "You wanted closure, Ethan. But closure isn't something you find by reopening wounds. It's something you earn by staying true to the person you claim to love." He looked down, tears brimming in his eyes. "I love you, Lena. I always have. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you." My voice softened. "You already did." For a moment, the silence between us was unbearable. The kind that hums with every unsaid word, every lost chance. "I wish you'd fought for me," he whispered. "I did," I said quietly. "Every day. Every time I trusted you when I had doubts. Every time I believed your past didn't matter. But love isn't a one-person fight." He took a step closer, his voice desperate. "Can we try again? I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." I felt my throat tighten. The girl who once would have said yes, who would have forgiven just to keep him, was gone. What stood before him now was a woman who'd learned that love without honesty is just illusion. "Ethan," I said gently, "you don't fix a broken promise by repeating it. You fix yourself by learning why you broke it in the first place." His shoulders slumped. "I guess I deserve that." I nodded. "You do. And I hope someday you find peace, just not at the cost of mine." And then, for the second and last time, I walked away from him. No tears, no turning back, just the quiet strength of someone who finally understood her worth. As his car disappeared down the road, I felt something shift inside me, not sadness, not regret, but release. In the weeks that followed, I finished the notebook I had started. It wasn't just a journal anymore, it had become my story, my voice. I sent it to a small publishing house that focused on real women's stories, not expecting anything. But 2 months later, they called. They wanted to publish it. I titled it, "The Night I Walked Away." When it was released, the response was overwhelming. Thousands of readers reached out, saying it gave them the courage to choose themselves. I cried when I read those letters, tears of pride, not pain. One day, during a live interview, a journalist asked, "If Ethan came back again and said he'd changed, would you give him another chance?" I smiled softly and replied, "If he truly changed, he wouldn't need to come back. He'd understand that losing me wasn't punishment, it was a lesson." Because that's what love taught me in the end, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to hold on, but to walk away with grace. And that night, under the quiet stars by the lake, I finally whispered the vows I had written, not for Ethan, but for myself. I promised to never forget my worth. I promised to never settle for half a heart. I promised to love myself enough to walk away when love stops being honest. And as the wind carried those words into the night, I realized that was the only vow I ever truly needed.